We live in a world obsessed with perfection. Every day we are bombarded with images of seemingly flawless lives. Social media feeds overflow with curated happiness and success. We see airbrushed models, picture-perfect families, and influencers boasting about their dream lives. It's easy to get caught up in the comparison game and feel inadequate. Beneath the surface of curated smiles and perfect lives lies a universal truth. We are all human. We all experience a range of emotions: joy, sadness, fear, anger, and everything in between. These emotions, even the uncomfortable ones, are what make us human. They are part of our shared human experience. The vulnerability void is the gap that exists between who we are and who we pretend to be. It's the space where we hide our true selves, fearing that our imperfections will make us unworthy of love and belonging. This void can manifest in different ways. For some, it might manifest as a constant need for validation from others, seeking approval through likes, comments, and followers. For others, it might manifest as a fear of intimacy, pushing away those who try to get close. The vulnerability void can also lead to a constant state of self-doubt and insecurity, making it difficult to embrace our strengths and celebrate our accomplishments. It's time to challenge the notion that vulnerability is a weakness. It's time to reclaim our stories, embrace our imperfections, and bridge the vulnerability void. This is not an easy task. It requires courage, self-compassion, and a willingness to step outside of our comfort zones. This documentary will explore the science behind vulnerability, examining the psychological and sociological factors that contribute to our fear of being real. We'll delve into the societal and cultural norms that perpetuate this fear and discuss the impact this has on our lives and our relationships. We'll hear from experts in the field of psychology, sociology, and human connection, gaining valuable insights into the importance of vulnerability and its role in fostering authentic relationships. Most importantly, we'll hear real stories from real people who have dared to be vulnerable. Their journeys will inspire us to embrace our own imperfections, challenge our fears, and step into the fullness of who we are. It's time to bridge the vulnerability void and create a world where authenticity is celebrated, connection is valued, and we can all show up as our true selves without apology or fear. From the moment we are born, we are hardwired for connection. As infants, our survival depends on our ability to form bonds with caregivers. This innate need for human connection doesn't disappear as we grow older. It continues to shape our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors throughout our lives. Dr. Brené Brown, a renowned researcher on vulnerability, courage, and shame, explains, "Connection is why we're here. It's what gives purpose and meaning to our lives. It's through connection that we experience love, belonging, and a sense of purpose. Authenticity allows us to connect with others on a deeper level, fostering genuine relationships built on trust and understanding." When we feel vulnerable, our bodies go into a state of stress. The sympathetic nervous system kicks in, releasing hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. This is the body's natural fight or flight response, designed to protect us from danger. However, in today's world, the threats we face are often not physical, but emotional. We fear judgment, criticism, and rejection. When we perceive these emotional threats, our bodies react in the same way they would to a physical threat, releasing stress hormones that can have a negative impact on our physical and mental health. Vulnerability activates brain areas associated with empathy, compassion, and social connection. Feeling connected releases oxytocin, the cuddle hormone. Oxytocin reduces stress and promotes trust and bonding. Authenticity is linked to vulnerability and deeper connections. Dr. Dan Siegel emphasizes authenticity for mental well-being. Authenticity creates coherence, aiding resilience and emotional regulation. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we break down the walls that separate us from others. We create space for empathy, compassion, and understanding to flourish. Vulnerability is not about weakness, it's about having the courage to be authentically ourselves, even when it's uncomfortable. It's about letting go of the need to be perfect and embracing our imperfections as part of what makes us human. Vulnerability is the key to unlocking deeper connections, experiencing greater joy, and living a more fulfilling life. However, the path to vulnerability is not always easy. It requires us to confront our fears, challenge our limiting beliefs, and step outside of our comfort zones. It's a journey that requires courage, self-compassion, and a willingness to embrace the unknown, but the rewards, as we'll discover, are immeasurable. By understanding the science behind vulnerability, we can begin to challenge our fears and create a world where authenticity is celebrated and connection is valued. It's time to break the silence, to challenge the fear, and to create a world where vulnerability is seen not as a weakness, but as the key to building a more compassionate, connected, and just society. We live in a culture obsessed with perfection. From a young age, we are bombarded with messages that tell us we need to be thinner, richer, smarter, and more successful to be worthy of love and acceptance. We are taught to strive for an unattainable ideal, leaving us feeling inadequate and ashamed of our imperfections. This pressure to be perfect permeates every aspect of our lives. In the workplace, we are expected to be high achievers, constantly striving for the next promotion or raise. In our personal lives, we are bombarded with images of picture-perfect families, romantic getaways, and hash-blessed lifestyles, making us question our own relationships and life choices. It's important to remember that social media is just a snapshot, a carefully curated version of reality, not the full picture. Social media has become both a blessing and a curse. It connects us globally, sharing experiences and building communities, but it also fosters a culture of curated perfectionism. Highlight reels showcase the best moments, making us feel inadequate. This constant comparison distorts reality, harming our mental health. Remember, social media is just a snapshot, not the full picture. At the root of our fear of being real lies a deep-seated fear of not being enough. We fear that if we show our true selves, with all our flaws and imperfections, we will be judged, rejected, and abandoned. This fear is often rooted in childhood experiences where we may have learned to suppress our true selves in order to gain approval or avoid criticism. We may have been told to toughen up, stop being so sensitive, or smile more. These messages, though often well-intentioned, can teach us to hide our true emotions and present a false persona to the world. This fear of not being enough can stay with us into adulthood, manifesting in our relationships, our careers, and our interactions with the world. We may find ourselves people-pleasing, avoiding conflict, or putting on a brave face when we are hurting inside. This fear of vulnerability can prevent us from forming meaningful connections, pursuing our passions, and living a truly authentic life. It can keep us trapped in a cycle of self-doubt and insecurity, preventing us from reaching our full potential. When fear of vulnerability becomes the norm, authenticity erodes. We trade our genuine selves for carefully crafted personas, designed to please others and avoid judgment. This erosion of authenticity has a profound impact on our relationships, our communities, and our society as a whole. As we become more guarded and less willing to show our true selves, our interactions become more superficial. We engage in small talk and avoid meaningful conversations, fearing that revealing too much will make us vulnerable to rejection or criticism. This lack of authenticity creates a sense of distance between people, even in close relationships. We may find ourselves surrounded by others, yet feeling deeply alone and disconnected. We long for genuine connection, but our fear of vulnerability prevents us from experiencing the intimacy and belonging we crave. This erosion of authenticity extends beyond our personal relationships. It seeps into our workplaces, our communities, and our political discourse. When we are afraid to show up as our authentic selves, we stifle creativity, innovation, and progress. We settle for the status quo, afraid to challenge the norm or speak our truth for fear of rocking the boat. We live in a world more connected than ever before. Thanks to technology, we can communicate globally with a touch. Yet, we face a crisis of connection. Loneliness, depression, and anxiety are rising, hyper-connected yet deeply disconnected. True connection requires vulnerability. Put down our phones, engage authentically, be present, listen with empathy, create space for vulnerability, build bridges of understanding and empathy. The consequences of the vulnerability void are far-reaching, impacting not only our individual well-being but also the health of our society as a whole. One of the most alarming consequences is the rise of loneliness and isolation. Loneliness isn't just about being physically alone, it's about feeling emotionally disconnected from others. It's a feeling of emptiness, a longing for belonging that goes unmet, and it's a growing epidemic in our modern world. Studies have shown that chronic loneliness can have serious consequences for both our physical and mental health. It can weaken our immune system, increase our risk of heart disease, and contribute to depression, anxiety, and even dementia. When we are afraid to be vulnerable, we isolate ourselves from others. We retreat behind our walls of self-protection, convinced that we are better off alone than risking rejection or judgment. This isolation, while seemingly protective, only exacerbates feelings of loneliness and disconnection. The impact of the vulnerability void extends far beyond individual lives. It creates a ripple effect, impacting families, communities, and society as a whole. When we are afraid to be vulnerable, we raise children who are also afraid to be vulnerable. We teach them to hide their true selves, to suppress their emotions, and to strive for an unattainable ideal of perfection. This can lead to a cycle of disconnection that is passed down from generation to generation. This fear of vulnerability also impacts our ability to address societal issues. When we are afraid to have difficult conversations, to challenge the status quo, or to stand up for what we believe in, we allow injustice and inequality to persist. The vulnerability void thrives in a culture of silence and fear. It's time to break the silence, to challenge the fear, and to create a world where vulnerability is seen not as a weakness, but as the key to building a more compassionate, connected, and just society. Sarah, a successful CEO, had always projected an image of unwavering confidence and success. From the boardroom to industry conferences, she exuded competence and control. Beneath this persona, Sarah harbored a deep fear of failure. This fear drove her to work tirelessly and micromanage her team. During a critical product launch, the product failed, causing significant losses. This time, she realized she needed to be vulnerable. Sarah called a company-wide meeting. She stood before her employees and spoke from the heart. She shared her fear of failure and commitment to learning. The response was overwhelming. The energy in the room shifted. Employees began to open up, sharing their own fears and challenges. The crisis meeting transformed into a powerful shared experience. Sarah cultivated a culture of vulnerability. She encouraged open communication and empowered her team. This shift sparked creativity, collaboration, and innovation. Employees were more engaged, productive, and committed. Sarah's journey is a powerful testament to the transformative power of vulnerability, not just in our personal lives, but also in our professional endeavors. When leaders allow themselves to be vulnerable, they create a ripple effect that can transform entire organizations. By showing their humanity, they give others permission to do the same, fostering a culture of trust, authenticity, and connection. This type of leadership, rooted in vulnerability and empathy, is not about weakness, it's about strength. It takes courage to show up as your authentic self, especially in the often cutthroat world of business. It takes humility to admit mistakes and to ask for help, and it takes a deep belief in the power of human connection to create a workplace where people feel safe to be vulnerable, to take risks, and to bring their whole selves to work. Sarah's story is not an isolated incident. Across industries and around the world, leaders are discovering that vulnerability is not a liability, but a superpower. By embracing vulnerability, they are creating more human-centered, innovative, and ultimately more successful organizations. The vulnerability void thrives in silence and isolation. It feeds on our fear of judgment, our need for control, and our belief that we are better off alone than risking the pain of rejection. However, as Sarah's story illustrates, the path to connection, joy, and fulfillment lies not in hiding from our vulnerability, but in embracing it. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we open ourselves up to the possibility of deeper, more meaningful connections with others. We discover that our imperfections are not something to be ashamed of, but rather they are what make us human, relatable, and worthy of love and belonging. The journey toward vulnerability is not always easy. It requires courage, self-compassion, and a willingness to challenge our deepest fears. But the rewards, as countless stories like Sarah's demonstrate, are immeasurable. When we embrace vulnerability, we not only transform our own lives, but also inspire others to do the same, creating a ripple effect that can change the world, one authentic connection at a time. It's time to bridge the vulnerability void and step into the fullness of who we are together. The journey towards embracing vulnerability begins within. We must first learn to be compassionate with ourselves. Treat ourselves with the same kindness we offer to a dear friend. Our inner critic is our harshest judge. We berate ourselves for mistakes, dwell on flaws, and compare ourselves to others. Challenge negative thoughts and reframe with kindness. Everyone makes mistakes. What can I learn from this? We are all works in progress on unique journeys. Embrace vulnerability with love and understanding. While self-compassion is essential, embracing vulnerability requires stepping outside our comfort zones. Cultivate authentic connections where we feel safe to be ourselves. Be selective about who we share our vulnerabilities with. Not everyone is deserving of our trust. Identify those who make you feel seen and accepted. These individuals have earned your trust. Sharing vulnerabilities can feel risky. It requires letting down our guard. Trust that we will be met with compassion. Vulnerability is a two-way street. Listen with empathy and offer support without judgment. Section 3, the power of small steps. Embracing vulnerability is a journey of self-discovery and growth. Start with small, manageable steps. Focus on one or two areas to be more vulnerable. Practice expressing your feelings openly. Progress, not perfection, is the goal. Be kind to yourself and try again when ready. Section 4, embracing imperfection. Fear of not being good enough is a barrier to vulnerability. We strive for perfection, hoping to be loved and accepted, but this pursuit is a fool's errand. Our imperfections make us unique and relatable. They let the light shine through. Embrace imperfections to be human. Release the need to be perfect. Embrace authenticity. Have the courage to be who we truly are. Embrace vulnerability for connection and joy. Section 1. The transformative power of vulnerability. Throughout this documentary, we've explored the multifaceted nature of vulnerability, the societal pressures that stifle its expression, and the profound impact it has on our lives and relationships. We've heard from experts and individuals who have bravely shared their personal journeys. Vulnerability is not a place of weakness, but a space of immense potential. It's in those moments of uncertainty, fear, and self-doubt that we tap into our most authentic selves and forge deeper connections with others. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we open ourselves up to a world of possibility, growth, and transformation. Vulnerability is not a sign of weakness, but a source of strength. It takes courage to show up as our true selves, imperfections and all, in a world that often values perfection over authenticity. It takes strength to admit our mistakes, to ask for help, and to let go of the need to control how others perceive us. The transformative power of vulnerability lies in its ability to break down the walls we build around our hearts, allowing for genuine connection, empathy, and love to flow freely. When we embrace vulnerability, we not only heal ourselves, but also inspire others to do the same, creating a ripple effect that can transform families, communities, and ultimately, the world. Section 2, a call to courage. Embracing vulnerability is not always easy. It requires confronting fears and stepping outside comfort zones. There will be moments of self-doubt and setbacks, but it's in those moments of courage, when we choose vulnerability over fear, that we truly come alive. This is a call to courage, a call to embrace vulnerability for personal growth and deeper connections. The world needs your courage and authenticity. The world needs you to be real.